course, but they also assist us in exonerating the wrongly accused. So, as you have noticed that the contributions have a very impact on our world now, because as um, as these contributions, it evolved and it has different contributions, which is um, part of that year, especially today. Next, the earliest records of prison come from the first millennia BC, located on the areas of mighty ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Prisons were stationed in the underground dungeons where guilty or suspected criminals spent their life either awaiting death sentence or a command to become slaves during that time. Antiquity, prisoners were held in poorly isolated buildings where they could often be visited by their friends and family. Primary source of their detention were not dungeons, high walls, or bars, but simple wooden blocks that were attached to their feet. Their prisons were built almost exclusively underground with tight and claustrophobic passageways and cells. Next is gladiators, is one of the most famous uses for the slaves in Roman Empire. Mighty Colosseum is the most famous gladiator battleground in Rome that has a slave army of 224 slaves that worked daily as a power source of the complicated network of 24 elevators that transported gladiators and their wild animal opponents from the underground dungeons to the arena floor. The conditions in the European prisons remained harsh until English royalty started being more involved with their justice system. Henry II commissioned the construction of first prison in 1166, together with the first draft of English legal system that used concept of jury. One of the most historic prison legislations was introduced in 1215 when the King John signed Magna Carta, which stated that no man could be imprisoned without trial. The age of modern prisons that we know today started with the several prison reforms in 19th century England. During that time, prisons started receiving more care. Concept of rehabilitation was introduced. The governments around the world started reconsidering their views on solitary confinement, which was primary source of the increased numbers of insane, suicidal, and catatonic prisoners. Most famous examples of those types of prisons happened during World War II, when Nazi government formed over 300 detention centers in which political opponents, Jews, gypsies, criminals, and others were detained without judicial process. Majority of them was eventually killed on an unprecedented massive scale that is today estimated to be between 11 and 17 million people. During the end of 20th century, modern prison system was finalized. Concept of probation service was introduced in 1991, and 3 years before that, first prison intended solely for the holding of inmates in permanent isolation was formed. Those supermax prisons became widespread across the entire United States, with over 40 of them being active in the year 2005. With the rise of the industry between 16th and 18th century, English prisons became overcrowded and new penal measures started being implemented, military pardon and penal transportations. From the birth of modern civilizations in 3rd millennia BC, almost every major